I think I mucked that up.
The start of the '84 season was I think, probably the most memorable game of footy I've ever played in at Geelong West. We played against Port Melbourne in the prelim final the year before and knocked them out. And we were drawn to play Port Melbourne at Port Oval first round of the 1984 season. And it was my first trip up to Port Melbourne, and there were probably a few first year players there who hadn't been to Port Melbourne either. So, but my memory of that game was the ball went up for the first quarter centre bounce, and within about 30 seconds there was two all-in brawls on each side of me on the half-back flanks. Daryl Farquharson and Gary Welsh were up there next with Port players, and that just caused a massive all-in brawl across the whole ground. So that took about 5 minutes to settle down, and I'm thinking to myself, God, what's going on here? And these guys are fair dinkum, and they jumped us. They kicked, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 goals, 6 goals, and really got on top of us. And my next memory of that game was in the first quarter. Still, was our forward recruit Leo King, who came to the club from Geelong. King hit in the goal square and carried off on a stretcher. So the day was getting going from bad to worse. We had a bad start on the scoreboard, and then Leo's been carried off on a stretcher. Okay, so during the course of that game, from when Leo got taken off the ground to the end of the game, it was basically us getting back in control of the game. Some vivid memories of Mark Brown and Neil Gibson just running the ball down the ground and just taking the game on. And we slowly started pegging ourselves back into the game. And my lasting memory of the game is the last 2 minutes of the game, where we were still 8 points down with about 30 minutes to go, and I don't know the actual goal kicker, but we got a goal and got us back into the game and with a chance, and it was getting really late, like 31, 32 minutes. Ball's gone into the centre, came out. We got it down to the half forward line. I think it might have been Kim Richardson's taken a mark and gone back and just pumped it up into the goal square. And lo and behold, he's back on the ground. Big Leo King has just stood up in the goal square and it's stuck. And as he's bringing it down to his chest, the siren's gone. So Leo's gone back and kicked this goal. We've won the game. And that was just the start of it, because we've got off the ground and there was riots everywhere. It was amazing. Like, we could just hear all this commotion outside, and there was supporters, there was reserve grade players all involved, and we're all getting iced up in the rooms after the game, and there's supporters coming in wanting ice packs in their eyes and stuff like that. So it was just full on. These Port supporters were just that dirty that they hadn't been able to avenge that loss, I think, the year before, and they took it out. And I think our seconds players who'd been having a nice afternoon on the grog acquitted themselves quite well that afternoon, and they should be very proud of their efforts. But anyway, Roger Phipps, our president, got up in the rooms and said to the boys, "That's it, guys, let's pack our gear up. We're not going in for a beer. We'll get on the bus," and off we go. So that was I've had a lasting memory of that game for a long time. The fact that I never had the opportunity to win a premiership, but that was one of the most exciting games of footy I've ever been involved in, and it was pretty good to come home with a win.
Johnny Burke, I remember coming home, walking, me and Paul Welsh were walking out of the Junction Oval rooms to get on the bus, and Johnny Burke's sticking his head out the side of the bus, giving it to us, and of course Paul and I didn't take it all that well. We wanted to go and reintroduce ourselves to John on the bus, but the Preston boys wouldn't let him come out, obviously. And of course we now know 3 or 4 years later he pushed the umpire over and jumped the fence and smashed someone in the crowd and got 10 years or life. So it's amazing how things turn, but it's probably a little bit of karma there.
We played at Sandringham one day. It was the week before the finals, and Joe Radojevic was out injured, and I played full forward. Week before the finals, we couldn't miss. we still wanted to win because we could have ended up playing Sandringham the next week. So I front up down the goal square, and there's 3 guys there barracking for Sandringham. And the opening line to me was, "Oh, we were here to abuse Radojevic, Wells. Boy, you're going to cop it now." And so they started on me all day, and they just kept at it. They were relentless at the southern end, which was the first and the third quarters. One guy actually sledged me with nearly as good as I've heard. He said, "There is no known sex act, Wells, that can produce something like you." I've since spoken to my mother about it, and she refutes that. I did get a chance to run into a goal at one stage because the guy on me had fallen over or something. He had a bad day, and the ball landed with me a couple of times, so I was able to put a bit of a torpedo just about fence height through the 3 of them, and they actually laughed and gave me a thumbs up, so we ended up on a good note. We won that game. No, we didn't. We lost that game, but went and played Sandringham the next week in the first semi-final and beat them. So, yeah, it was an interesting day down at Beach Road.
What I want to say is that my oldest daughter come home one night, she had this fella with him and introduced himself, and lo and behold, it's Jamie Gillies' son. So we've kept a little bit of the Geelong West Football Club tie, and every once in a while when I do get to see Jamie, we try and tell the kids that it was a good standard of football, but they're trying to tell us that we played around dinosaurs and all these, the pace of the game was very slow. Well, believe me, it wasn't slow. It was just not a matter of physically getting through the game. It was a case of mentally getting through it also, because we did have a lot of pressure on us also. People think that it was just a pastime, but it wasn't. We were there and we were fair income just as much as the players are fair income now.
Sorry. And what was I going to say? I was on the bench against Williamstown, and the game started 2:10, and I arrived at 10-2, and you wouldn't believe it. Billy was furious. One more minute. You wouldn't be in. He had dinner served and stripped, ready to go in, and my excuse was my car caught on fire up the driveway, which was true. Terry Bright still laughs at that. And so anyway, I sat on the bench that day, and we beat Williamstown, I think 17-27 to 4-5. And Billy never gave me a run. That was my punishment, and I was in the seconds next week. Then he gave me another opportunity against Coburg at Coburg. That was a big game. It was on TV, and I wanted to play in that. You wouldn't believe it. I'd trained for 2 hours that Thursday night, and the final run through from the goals up to the club rooms here, it's only 1 minute to go, and I got within 30 yards of the club rooms, and I felt this pull in the back of my leg, which I've never felt before. I now know that was a hamstring. And Billy, again, as shrewd as he is, he said, what happened then? I said, "What do you mean?" He said, you stopped. I said, I stood on one of those little taps that turn the hoses on. I forget their names now. A spray. I said, all right. Anyway, I spent the next 2 days stretching my leg and trying to get ready for Sunday. Anyway, I put in a shocking performance, and Billy pulled me off during the last quarter, and he said to me after the game, "Don't you ever lie to me again." See how Billy, the veins were sticking out. So I was put back in the seconds. And
I remember a couple of mates were talking, and they said, "Look, you're going to get hammered playing down the VFA." And I said, "Well, I'm expecting to be a bit of a target." And I said, "I'll be quite prepared for that." And there was a few people had a weight, but I was pretty strong and knew what was going on. And I said to some of the young blokes, if any sort of a blue starts, don't keep out of it. I can look after myself, and we got umpires that'll stop all that. And so a few times there was people having a bit of a swing and a whack. And one game, it was against Port Melbourne down on West Oval, and a couple of the Port Melbourne blokes had a dig at me, and they said that I won't see the game out. And I remember was in the second quarter, there was one of their hard nuts were scrimmaging for the ball, and I tried to punch the ball, knocked him out. I was hoping that I'd miss the ball. Anyway, that started a nice old blue, and players come from everywhere, and they picked this bloke up, and his legs were a bit like jelly. And I said, well, anyone wants to have another go, you'll finish up just like him. And quite a few of the blokes were saying, yeah, we'll see about that. But I never had anyone else have a go at me for the whole game. And when we finished, I said to the young blokes in there, I said, you can't afford to let these people walk all over you. I said, I don't expect you to go out there throwing punches, but you've got to learn to protect yourself. And if someone lets one go, I don't mind if you smack them back. You know, there's a chance you could get rubbed out, but I said that will let the opposition know that you're not easy meat, that they won't pick on you. But yeah, well, I'll never forget that game against Port. It was a rugged affair that day. And the good thing about it, they were one of the top sides, and while they're running around trying to get a piece of me, our kids were they went riot, and we finished up won that game. It was one of the good memories while I was here.
And then there was another opportunity came up. I've got to think hard here, but I was picked to play in the last game at Port Melbourne against Port, and it is true that the club, well, there's no doubt about it, rested a lot of star players, because it didn't matter what happened at Port Melbourne that day. We were going to play Port in the second semi because the two clubs had finished up on top of the ladder. And but by quarter time, I had my face spat in or spattered at. I'd been knocked out cold and put on a stretcher, and I'd also been reported. That was a hell of a game. There was a big crowd there, and I remember when the final siren went, there were thousands of people on the ground. There was about 20 of them chasing me, so I ran up the race. But Buster Harlan and myself ended up at the tribunal, and we got 4 weeks for whacking each other. And I didn't know Buster that well off the ground, but I do believe he's quite a nice fella.
During my career here at West, I recall an incident that happened. We trained on Tuesday and Thursdays, and we trained Saturday morning, and I knew something was wrong because all the players were coming up to me on the Saturday morning and saying to me, look, you'll be right, and I didn't quite know what the players were on about. And that morning, at the end of training, Billy came up to me and said, look, tomorrow you're going to have one of the biggest jobs since you've been playing seniors. And he said, I'll talk to you more about it tomorrow. Well, on the Sunday, it was Port Melbourne versus Geelong West here at Church Street. And I clearly remember I was sitting there putting my boots on, and Billy sat next to me and he said, look, I'll let you know now. He goes, you're playing on Sammy Holt, do you know who he is? And I clearly said, no, I don't really know who he is. And he goes, well, you're going to get to know him pretty well. He said, he's number 10, and he goes, he looks like a samurai. And I started laughing, and he goes, look, seriously, he goes, don't be intimidated by him. He goes, when you go out there, he's not going to shake your hand, he's not going to be nice to you. He said, but don't be too scared of him. He goes, just hold your ground. And he said, the main thing is just playing tight. He said, but one thing I'll tell you is he's a bloody good player. And he goes, all I want you to do is just keep at him and keep at him. Well, it happened to be that John Friend and Ivan Russell and myself were sort of lining up across the half-back line, waiting for them players to line up. Well, lo and behold, Sammy Holt, they were kicking down the bottom end, we're kicking the Church Street end. Sammy Holt lines up right in front of the coach's box, and Friendy goes, well, there he is over there, go and pick him up. So when I got within about 1.5 meters of him, he's gone to put his hand out, and I clearly remember Billy yelling out, don't shake his hand, he's a dog. and I didn't shake his hand. Well, with that, he put his hand down, but he stepped forward probably a metre, and with that he just spat in my eye, and I went to wipe it, and in the movement of trying to wipe the slag out of my eye, he's given me the best right hook, and I hit the ground, and that was probably one of the biggest initiations of Geelong West versus Port Melbourne. And
Darky Harris coached. Darky was very good to me. He's hard but fair. But 83, 84, 85 when he coached me, I was lucky enough to win 1 investment fairest and 2 runner-ups due to his tutelage of the game. Hard but fair, but yeah, he was very good to me, and probably the coach that I've learnt the most of, at that impressionable age that I was at that time. So, as I said, he was hard and fair. But I remember one night we come to training after a close loss, and he wasn't too happy after the game. Said, "Righto, everyone there early training," and he lined us up the centre square, 1 player at each of the 4 corners, the ball in the centre circle. Said, blew the whistle, and the 4th person that got to the ball had to go and line up again. So you can imagine us doing that 10 times each, and there was a few cuts and bruises from that. And I remember talking to Darky a few years later about that, and he was sort of going, "Yeah, I shouldn't have done that." And I thought, "Oh no, well, that following week and the remainder of that year, our sort of contested ball was right up there, and 83 we..."
Barry Fowler's a bloke who I found very interesting. Barry was Billy's hatchet man, I call him. And so Billy was ahead of his time. The VFA had brought in the interchange rule. So what's Billy doing? He's got West would, the opposition would kick a point, and West would be about to kick out. Howard Smith, the great fullback. Billy would have the forward pocket player for West just to step over the line at the other end of the ground, and out from the crowd and over the fence basically would be a Geelong West bloke, and he'd run over the boundary line here. The rest of the play was over the other side, and Howard would kick the ball out to somebody like Jeff Klein, and he'd run right down one side and stick it up to Joe. So they had to change the interchange rule because Billy was exploiting it and bringing the interchange gate. Another thing I noticed when I was sitting on the bench, we might be kicking into the wind, and the ball they were using was one that came out of a bucket of water. It was that heavy because the opposition were using it to kick with the wind. Then the end of the quarter, when it was our turn to kick with the wind, Joe Radojevic had kicked the ball out of bounds and over the top of the hill. The umpire's calling for a new ball, so they throw a nice new light one out there, and about 2 minutes later, Barry Fowler appears back on the bench with the wet football up his jumper. There was all these little tactics that Billy was doing, and I don't know. I'm only telling the fans this one, the West supporters. They may know these things, they may not. Another little thing that comes to mind is back in those days, if the firsts played at West on the Sunday, the seconds would play at the opposition ground on the Saturday. And I remember playing at Preston one day in the seconds, and came out of the club rooms, and I was driving by myself, and looked up and there was a few blokes, and I said, "Dennis, Irvs, would you like a ride home with me? I'm by myself." He said, "Well, yes, LT, but it's straight home, no mucking around. I've got a very important function to go to with Jill tonight for the school." I said, "I've got important people waiting for me too, Dennis, so we're going straight home." So we're going down St George's Road, Preston, and Dennis said that he felt a little dry in the throat and would just like one quick one. Well, to cut a long story short, we drove up the driveway here at West on Sunday just in time to see the seniors run out. So we had a lot of fun.
There was one occasion that I remember Billy trying to get me to play the way he wanted me to play, and I wasn't against it, but I just found it hard. I was more of a running player, and Billy wanted me to stay back home a bit more and look after players. And as much as you listen to the coaches, every once in a while, it was just a habit that you'd run off. And Billy made me pay for it by putting me on the bench the following week. And And as I said, back in them days, there's no winning change. You just sat there and waited for your turn. And usually it was midway through the third quarter, if not start of the last quarter, the two interchange players would go on. And I remember sitting there, and it was just before 3/4 time. Billy looked across and said, "Right, get up." He goes, "You're on." And next minute I ran onto the ground, and he told me who to pick up, and I ran across and picked him up, and all of a sudden Billy Frost come running out. He was a runner, and he said, "Billy said, if you don't get a kick within 5 minutes, you're off." Well, I thought, right, where's the ball? And the ball was in front of the main scoreboard, and I thought, I'm going to dart off here. So I took off, and I remember very clearly Tony Gilmore handballing the ball to me, and I was probably about 35, 40 metres out, and I kicked the goal, and I was wrapped. I thought, job done, I've got a kick, but not only that, but I've got the supplementary also, I've got the goal. And on my way back, I was running down the middle of the ground, and lo and behold, Billy Frost runs across, and he goes, "Billy said, get off." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Get off." He goes, and I ran across the boundary line, and as I got to the boundary line, he goes, "What did I tell you?" And I said, "Billy said, I've got to get a kick within 5 minutes. He goes, "Your first job is to look after your man. You look after your man, you ran off." He says, "That's just sit there and cool your jets." I'll never forget that. So I was on for a grand total of about 2.5 minutes.
And one bloke I love playing with was, hasn't been mentioned, dispatched for many, many years, was Steve Parsons. Shit, he was scary, but he was a great bloke, and we all walked taller when he was on the ground. And we actually that year we started off with a real bang. I'm not sure whether it was eight on the trot or 11 on the go, and then we'll come up to play. We're undefeated. We're going to come up and play against Caulfield, as I remember, Caulfield away. And at the time it didn't compute, but Billy planted this seed of doubt in playing Caulfield up there. I remember that. All week he kept reminding us of the perils and dangers of playing Caulfield. And they were on the bottom, actually. They hadn't won a game, I'm not sure. But, yep, you picked it, sure enough. Cold, windy day, and we get beat for the first time. And I never actually saw this, but rumour has it that Billy, Gannon and co got 8-1 on Caulfield that day. Feeding, I still think they were counting the money still as we lit past Werribee on the bus, and I suppose the little master had pulled off a big plunge.
So I had plenty of memorable games, obviously the finals, and I'm sure other players have mentioned the infamous game against Port Melbourne in the first game of the year, where there was a number of fights. But another one that does come to mind is the day we won the game at Frankston after the game, and what I mean by that was there'd been nip and tuck all day at Frankston. Little Frankie Vagona was the umpire. I'm not too sure if there was dual umpires in that day and age or not, but he was certainly the one in control at the time. So the scores had been nip and tuck, and we were making a late surge, and the ball had been kicked into our forward line. We were less than a goal down. It was kicked into our just in front of the square, and the pack went up and the siren sounded. So the pack's come down, hit the ground, and all the West players are heads down and bent over, and all the Frankston players are a cock a hoop. They're patting each other on the back, etc. And the ball must have come down off the pack and bounced into Simon Taylor's hands, and Simon, in frustration, he just kicked the ball away through the goals, which what he would have done in normal time. So he's done that, and little Frankie's turned to the goal umpire and said, "All clear." And Frank obviously didn't hear the siren, so the only one in the ground that didn't. And so that's enough. The goal umpires signalled the goal, so Frank's turned to run back to the centre, and I'm not too sure if the siren was blown again or the other umpire let him know that the game finished. So he blew time off, and all of a sudden the West guys were jumping up and down, and the Frankston guys were bent over and had lost the game. So I'm sure Frank copped plenty of abuse as he made his way off the Frankston Oval, but Frank would have been used to that, I'm sure, but that was a memorable game for the way it finished.
Some of the more memorable highlights that I do remember in the VFA days was certainly a game we played down at Frankston where the siren went. Simon Taylor kicked the goal after the siren. Frankie Fagona never heard the siren. We won the match. The spectators went wild, and for some unexplicable reasons the showers were cold. Never mind, we won. We celebrated like mad. Unfortunately, in my time at West, I can only remember winning 1 or 2 games at Coburg. For some reason, we could never win a game there. I don't know why. Maybe because they were one of the better sides. And of course, the Port Melbourne crowd. You have to walk through the crowd to get to the change rooms. That'd have helped you if you won, because you would get spat on the way out. And sometimes it was quite scary walking past them. Although it was quite enjoyable when we did win, because we'd all go as a group and we would, as they say, stick it up.
A neighbour of mine played in the last game I ever played for when I was playing for Altona Central. And that's 3 months after the season finished. He said, "You want to go and have a beer and watch the game?" And went over and watched it. And I thought, have a look at this bloke taking money under false pretense. I was absolutely terrible. I was lazy. I was cheating. And I thought, this is where I had to go. I'm really glad I retired, but yeah, I haven't missed it since. But as I've said earlier, places like this, I really did miss, and I loved it here, and yeah, always will.
North Shore and St Mary's and Thompson sides in those days in the Evelynhurst taught me about hardness and a bit of thuggery. It was a good school to have coming to play VFA, because fair dinkum, was sometimes willing and brutal. That year it was good hard footy, and I really loved it. And we made the GF the hard way, going through the semi and then the prelim, and I reckon we're the best side that year. And I was really confident of winning. But when Pentridge opened its doors on Sundays and let most of Coburg's players out to play, it evened things out a bit. Gunner, I remember Johnny Scarlett, he was going great, and then, you know, I reckon probably the worst incident I've ever seen on a footy field happened. I just wish Steve Parsons had been on the ground that day. Still, we had our chances, we just couldn't get over the line. I only wish probably Hinky, instead of you having the ball, would rather have Joe have the ball in those last few minutes in the goal square. It was a pretty big disappointment in my career, but we had a few more to come, didn't we, Billy?
As to the players I played against, some of them quite memorable, was definitely Phil Cleary from Coburg. Probably the second most worst case that I've seen of white-eyed fever. The guy was mad when he went on the ground. For some reason, I would end up on him. I don't know why, just don't like him, I suppose. And probably Ray Shaw. He was just a little prick. I enjoyed playing on him because he was captain coach, seeing the troubles of the world on him when we lost, so I'd always give it to him. I quite enjoyed doing that.
The guys that looked after you on the field, and Brett Tawney, and yes, Welshie, I'll give you a mention as well. You know, you hogged the forward line, you gave nothing to anybody else, you abused us if we got in your way, we jumped over the packs. Couldn't do a thing right with you, mate, but which was really disappointing, because you know, not only were we good mates, we were cousins, but that went out the door, didn't it? But look, I can't complain, mate. You sort of got it all your own way, and you know, I was happy for you to do that and for you to take the limelight. I remember at the end of the '83 season, there were a few of us that, even though we lost the grand final, we sort of took the week off, and namely Paul Welsh, Mark McDowell and myself, after the initial few days off, we saw the week out, and yeah, it was a tough week, and there was plenty of recovering to do after that. But
career, I don't think you'd call it a career. But to this day, look, it was an absolute rush. I'd never have played in the VFA or VFL without the opportunity that Billy gave me. I owe him a lot. I really respect him. I love the days of him playing tennis down at Miko Burns with Gannon and trying to cheat every point. And it was the same on the golf course. Cheat. You know, it was just he and Gannon used to make me laugh.
Difficult to, I know. I was very disappointed not getting one game down at Geelong. I was told by Kenny Newland and Bill Ryan one night at training, they said, you're in the seniors this week, you've only got to get a couple of kicks, we're having a practice match here, and we're going to kick it to you because we want you in. So I've gone home and said to Mum and Dad, let's watch league teams tonight. But it wasn't to be, and I was at the footy recently with a mate of mine, Trevor Elliott, and we ran into Bruce Nankervis, a lovely bloke, and Trevor said to Bruce, why didn't they give Lindsay a game down here? And Bruce said they didn't like him. Well, I didn't like some of them either. Terry Hogan, Billy McMaster, John Hyde. Up yours, John, Billy and Terry.